Welcome to Data Every Friday. My name is Michael Schimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We are running this session here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, German time essentially, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, cloud computing, data-driven applications, anything, MVP clusters, compute clusters, and so on, right? All questions are allowed. You can use the chat here to raise a live question if you want. You can use the Q&A function of this client to submit a question. And you can also raise your hand. I would give you voice, essentially. Don't misuse that. And if you have a question that comes up over the week, until next Data Friday, you can also use a form, which I show you the link for after today's session, essentially. If you receive multiple questions, I would be cherry picking. If there will be no questions at all, I would talk about the cluster here. Haven't done much. Well, a little bit, but not too much, to be honest. So, yeah, send more questions, essentially. It's all good. We received one from the internal team, actually. So let's... let me just show it to you. Okay, this is essentially about the Error Mart. And the Error Mart is a concept that's been around for well, when we wrote the book, it was in there already, essentially. Now, what's the Error Mart? So first of all, let's talk about what Kimball, for example, defines the Error Mart for and what it is not, essentially. Kimball defines an Error Mart to capture metrics about the number of errors that happen, for example, during the runtime or during the loading of the data warehouse. So it's about a KPIs collection, right? It's just like a typical data mart, but here about the errors, about maybe the runtime issues and so on. So it's really statistical information that Kimball captures in the error mart as he defines it. Our definition here is a little bit different. The error mart, well, first off, we would capture these type of KPIs, error KPIs, number of tables failed or number of jobs failed, that kind of stuff, we would typically capture in the metrics mart. The metrics mart captures your KPIs about the product you're building, the data warehouse itself, or the data platform itself. So that's where those KPIs about errors, but also runtimes and so on, they all belong to the metrics mart. Yeah, that's the basic idea. The metrics vault, essentially. Metrics vault captures it. Metrics mart essentially presents it to the end user, so you can use a dashboarding tool to present your KPIs. All right, so that's how we capture error data. So that's not the Error Mart 4, actually, just to make that clear as first. So the Error Mart is used for those records which are rejected during the loading of the data platform. So typically, when you get data from a source system, either via files or via real-time messages or maybe some direct connection to the source system, you capture data and then you load this data into the data lake. From the data lake, you then load the data into the raw data vault, into the business vault, information vault, and so on. In every step, but especially in the first steps, well, in every step there could be errors happening, right? But especially for the very first steps, for the staging area or your data lake and the raw data vault, we apply hard rules. So, which means that we essentially try to align the data types. Let's say you get a CSV file, just a string. And we have to map the CSV file into a Parquet file. That's where it starts, right? Or into a JSON file on the data lake. You start applying some structures. You're assuming some columns to be there. You're assuming some data type, some length, and so on, right? This assumption is done either by getting some information from the data profiling, automatically maybe, or from some interface description, but you're making some assumptions. And those hard rules might change over time. And the problem is when the hard rules change because your data structures change for whatever reason, either because the developers modify the data structures, could be one reason, or your data profiling was not comprehensive enough, so you only have you didn't catch a long string essentially, or the interface description is off, right? So there's a gap between the interface description, what it describes, and what the actual data is essentially. But you have to capture the good, the bad, and the ugly data inside the data lake and inside the raw data vault. Now you're getting data which you did not expect, based on the data type, based on the length, based on the maybe the column didn't exist in the interface description, and so on, right? So depending on how you stage your data, how you load the data in the raw data vault, you might end up in an error. So yeah, column doesn't exist or data type is too long, that kind of stuff, right? And what do we do with these records, right? These records exist and they must end up in a raw data vault. So what we do is, instead of letting them go, we redirect those records into the Error Mart. And the Error Mart is just a storage for those records that get rejected by the next layer. Again, typically in the staging area, or for the staging area and for the raw data vault, but it could also happen in the business vault, but less, because we already captured the data in raw data vault. We know the structures. And then when we load the data in a business vault to process it, to apply business rules, we typically know the structures. Wait. The problem is, what about JSON data, unstructured data sets, and so on? So we might have these issues as well, even for the business vault, even for information marts, but it gets less and less. So most important application of the Error Mart is typically in the loading of the data lakes for staging purposes, and in the raw data vault. That's where I would say is the biggest application section. So the Error Mart, as we define it in the book, was essentially in when we load the data in SSIS, in SQL Server Integration Services, ETL tool for Microsoft. When we load data in SSIS, and some data got rejected by the targets, by destination of the flow, we could then essentially define a error output, I believe it's called, error output into some alternative location. And then we roll the data into a table in a different schema in the Error Mart. Well, that assumes that you know the schema of your errors, right? Which, yeah, it's I wouldn't do it this way anymore, and we didn't do it anymore this way. What we typically do is, so first of all, the Error Mart, let's define it first, is its own schema with error tables or error storage, let's say storage to capture your rejected errors, records, right? That's the basic idea. You need to capture this data, but you don't know the structure of the errors, and that's the flaw of the book, I would say. So what we do is typically, let's develop this a bit. Instead of creating one table per error output as in the book, I would just create one table in the Error Mart. So the Error Mart is mostly one table, and then this table structure is the error record, but codified as a JSON string, for example. So it can capture any kind of structure, first of all. And then you attach the load in the record source by the bare minimum. Yeah, the loaded record source. Because you need to know this record came from a certain batch or certain real-time messenger kind of stuff. So the record source, or some indicator for the source system, and the load date. That identifies the incoming batch of data, essentially. And again, the load date is a timestamp, right? So we're just dumping this data into this table, and this table should be empty, right? Because there should be no errors. Which means if there's a record in there, I would create a dashboard on top of that, or a process that looks into this table and checks if this table is empty. And your job is to make sure to analyze what's going on. Why is these records being rejected? And then fix the raw data vault or the next layer, maybe the data lake or the business vault and so on, but typically the raw data vault. Fix the raw data vault, modify the hard rule, increase the length of the last name, and then load the data from the Error Mart into the raw data vault. So all your data that came from the source ends up in the raw data vault. That's the goal, but also in staging and so on. So that's the idea. Now, I don't like to modify the error table, the Error Mart table. So removing those records are already done, right? Because I just said the table should be empty. So what we typically do is either I don't like updates, but let's start with that. So you have a flag on that on this table that says, okay, we're done reloading this record into the target, essentially. So you also want, by the way, to have some information about the process that raised the issue, that rejected the record, the mapping name or something, or some name, so you can quickly identify which process rejected it, and that's good for debugging purposes, essentially. But then you need to mark the record as being completed or delete the record. I don't like deleting, so I would rather mark it, but I don't like the update either. So what we typically do is we have a log file that also uses the same primary key as the error table that says, okay, this record for this load date, for this record source, for this mapping, whatever, has been processed, is in the raw data vault, in the staging area, whatever, right? That's what you want to do. So some log file, so you can quickly identify the difference between you need to identify the unmodified records in the Error Mart, because the unmodified records, or unprocessed records, sorry, the unprocessed records, you must process. And by you, I mean you as a data warehouse team. It's not a business problem, it's your problem. You have to process these records into the target and then mark them as completed in the log file, essentially. That's how it works. Now, then we said, okay, why do we need to have a relational engine to sort these JSON documents? Yeah, you could also use just a data lake. Whenever there's an error happening, you dump the JSON messages or these JSON structures for your rejected records into some file, into some key on your data lake. And again, this must be empty or it must be processed. And then you identify the documents, the JSON documents on this data lake, where they belong to, where they came from, and are they processed or not in a log file essentially. So there's some variations. You could deal with this using Parquet files, JSON documents, what else, right? So, but that's the idea. So the Error Mart is really a storage for those rejected errors. It must be very flexible to capture all kinds of different errors, right? Because it's an error. You didn't expect a structure, so you must have something that captures those unexpected structures, JSON, typically. And then so first of all, it's the storage, and then it's the processing by your team, by the database team, because it's really your problem. The business users can't solve that problem. It's not a business problem. It's really you made the mistake for whatever reason. I'm not blaming you here, right? But you made the mistake, that's what it is, that you expected different data. And you have to relax those hard rules and make it a bit softer. I don't say soft rules, right? You just have to relax your hard rules, let's say that. And the Error Mart tells you where those hard rules are too hard, essentially. And so you have to process these records and make sure all these rejected records end up in the raw data vault. That's where they belong to, the good, the bad, the ugly data. And that's why the Error Mart is actually important in a data vault architecture, because those unexpected records we have all the time. That's what it is. So yeah, that's the Error Mart. That's the basic idea. So let's take a look at the questions. Sorry for that. I jumped over the questions. A good question, actually. What is your definition of the Error Mart? So I just define it, right? It's storage, it's processing of the rejected records into typically the data lake and the raw data vault. Could happen also in the business vault, in the information mart, but less and less, because you know the structures you analyze the data structures for the raw data vault. And if the data ends up in the raw data vault, I wonder why the records would get rejected by the business vault rule. Well, there might be some cases. But I'm not talking about the records which are rejected by your business rule in that sense. So let's say every underage person cannot buy a service here, whatever, right? So yeah, that's just the outcome of the business rule, in my opinion. That's not a change. It's really the unexpected records that didn't match. Let's say you have a raw data vault satellite where you have a JSON structure in there, and there's a field that there's some field missing or something, and that's why your process fails, something like that. So, or some attributes that you have to process, and for example, you expect certain attributes in a JSON, and you want to turn it into relational attributes. And then there's more attributes in the JSON, and you try to turn that into relational attributes, and the target fails because you need to store all these attributes in a target table, in a relation table, and that's where the whole record gets rejected, kind of stuff, right? So as a backup, you always implement this redirection of any rejection always into the Error Mart. It's your dump. You just dump those records into a data lake, essentially, or into this site table. And by the way, in Oracle, we used to have, for insert statements, there was an alternative location. So in Oracle, in the insert statement, you could define an alternative target table if the insert fails. And that was the pure definition of the Error Mart. Well, those tables were just next to the original table, right? In the same schema. There was a problem, but so be it. So nice design. But your Error Mart could also be part of the raw data vault. I don't like it though. But so be it. That's what we had in a few projects, actually. We defined those Oracle, whatever the name was, these output tables for the rejections. We defined those tables as the Error Mart, essentially. But I prefer having a different schema and just one table, maybe one table per layer. But even one table would be sufficient with some metadata, the error message or the error record. I prefer that on a relation database, Snowflake, whatever, Synapse, or on a data lake, and you just dump it. What's the Error Mart's main goal? The main goal is here to make sure we can reload or process those rejected rows and make sure we capture the good, the bad, the ugly data inside the raw data vault and inside the data lake. All data should be there, even the data you did not expect. Yes, it might be delayed because it gets rejected first, and after processing, after each layer, you check out, is the Error Mart empty or fully processed? If not, send an email to the team. They have to analyze something manually now. Relax the hard rules, and then reloading those records into the intended target. Yes, and it takes some time, maybe some days, until the hotfix went through, the hard rule has been relaxed, and so on. And as part of the fix, and you have to fix it anyway, as part of the fix of the target, when you relax those hard rules, you also do the initial load of the error records, of the rejected records into your modified target AND, essentially. That's the basic idea. And mark those records as being processed by the log file. So you know which one are done, essentially. And the log file I like because it's fully auditable, right? So I know for a while those records have been missing because they got rejected for technical issue. That's what it is. Can't change that. But we fixed that. Here's when we fixed it, how we fixed it, and so on. It's all in a log file, essentially, right? So it's fully transparent what's happening, essentially. What are key considerations when designing an Error Mart? Make it flexible to capture the unexpected data. That's the biggest challenge sometimes. Think about this. What about blob fields in your source system? You didn't expect them, but now they arrive. JSON, yeah, we can deal with this, but I would MIME encode those binary blob fields. What else? MIME encode them into the JSON or store these blob fields in the data lake as well, right? So just side by side next to the JSON that you produce. But you also want to expect blob fields, essentially, right? Or deal with them. Maybe ignore them. That could be one option, but you need to make a decision here how you deal with those unexpected elements. So it must be flexible. It must be flexible enough to capture your unexpected data. That's what I would say. And really, it's for every layer. So in theory, a record could get rejected in every layer from the from staging process, the loading, the raw data vault, the business vault information mart, especially when you materialize your targets, right? They get less and less. Most issues happen in the staging process for the data lake and for the loading process for the raw data vault. That's why I would expect 99, if not, I truly believe in my past, all the errors happen there, to be honest. But I wouldn't rule out the other layers as well, right? So design-wise, we also want to make sure every layer can have rejected rows. And in all your processes, in all your loading processes, whenever something happens, something unexpected, some exception during the insert into the target, well, what do? You fail. Okay, that's what it is. But you redirect those records you wanted to insert into the Error Mart. You make a JSON out of it and dump it into the data lake, essentially. That's the basic idea. And then you notify, right? Either because there's a process, a monitoring process on the Error Mart, monitoring that it's empty or fully processed, or from your files, you send some message either to a log system like CloudWatch, Graylog or something, and then there's some alarm on that, or you send out an email from the files and what else, right? So I would prefer the log files, to be honest. But yeah, that's the basic idea. And then there must be a process by your team to deal with those records. I've seen some cases where they had an Error Mart, that's fine, but it was running full. Nobody was caring about it. And that's one thing. And that's an issue, right? So somebody has to deal with the Error Mart and process those records. And it must be clear it's not a business problem. I know some projects where they assumed those records is not a problem of the database team. The business will deal with this because it's unexpected data. We got some interface description and that said, okay, the house number is an integer value, and all of a sudden we get string values. So that's a business problem. No, it's not. Your job as a database team is to capture the data into the data lake, into the raw data vault by all means, and you have to deal with the Error Mart. That's your tool, essentially, especially your tool. Yes, you might talk to business users when in the later layers, in the business vault information marts, records get rejected. But again, that's very seldom from my experience. It could happen theoretically, yes. And then we might need to talk to business sometimes. But it's your job to make sure the Error Mart is fully processed, essentially. All the records from the source, even the ugly, the bad, the good ones, must be in the raw level. That's the basic idea. Cool. Good question. I hope I covered everything here. All the questions, all the definitions here. So if you have a question like this comes from an internal team for a customer project where they're dealing with the Error Mart at the moment. Yeah, check out this URL here. That's the way you find a form where you can submit your questions, essentially, sfr.de/dbfriday. And check out also our other webinars for WhereEscape and DBT. That's what you find behind scalefree.to/webinars. And if you can't wait until next Friday, or because when we receive multiple questions, it might take some time until I pick up a question, you can also use a forum-style community, the Data Innovators Exchange, where you can essentially submit questions all day, all night, all weekend, and people from either Scalefree or Ignition Data in Australia will jump on your question. That's like a 24-hour free support if you want. and they are encouraged to answer those questions as quick as possible. So yeah, that's a cool thing. So yeah, use this one as well. And other than that, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for coming today, and see you hopefully next Friday. Thank you, guys.